Hello, Trojan fans. Welcome to another edition of the Peristyle Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Abraham, joined alongside Connor Morrissette, a.k.a. Triple Double. And we got to talk all about the USC Trojans 4-0 heading into the second road game in a row this weekend, going to Boulder. And Connor and I, along with Chris Trevino, will be there. So we're going to throw out the game that just happened. USC defeats Arizona State 42-28. Kind of briefly talk about that. What we've been hearing from practice. We got to hear from Grinch, defensive coordinator, Lincoln Riley, the head coach, and several defensive players heading into practice, which will be a little bit later on this afternoon. And of course, the 9 a.m. Big Noon Kickoff game for Colorado. You got the 7:30 p.m. game in Tempe, then a 9 a.m. game, which is almost like a short week. And Lincoln Riley actually mentioned that. And then another 7:30 game after that for Arizona. If you're watching live on YouTube, thank you very much for doing that. Please like and subscribe over there. We are on the YouTube doing this live. If you're doing that, you can see Connor and I here. Connor noticed I got a haircut.
Didn't notice yesterday, though. Sorry.
That's okay. It's not like, you're my significant other or anything, so that's good. Did you ever do that? Like, did your girlfriend get mad at you if you don't notice a haircut or something? Happens, I'm sure. All the time.
Mine colors her hair, but it doesn't change, so I don't notice because it doesn't change the color, and then she gets mad when I don't notice, but it's very similar. It goes from, like, black to black, so I don't really understand that sometimes. Okay. So definitely been there.
Nice. All right. Well, thanks, everyone, for joining us there. If you have questions or comments for the show, you can email us, podcast@uscfootball.com. We got a bunch of emails to get to. We also have a bunch of voicemails, 424-254-9141. Leave us a voicemail. Or shoot us a text. I think we have a text to get through as well. And if you have the Apple Podcasting app, you can follow us over there at the Peristyle Podcast and leave us a 5-star rating and review. And we do have a couple of new reviews, Connor.
Sweet.
I think they're critical of you. I'm not sure. I'm just kidding.
Oh, please. Hey, let's go.
Now, Smeeds Griffin, 5-star review from Smeeds Griffin says, "Fight on from New Jersey. Been a USC fan since I was about 8 years old, even though I live in New Jersey. I love that this podcast keeps me connected and in the loop with any and everything going on around USC. Appreciate all the hard work you guys do, and I'm always looking forward to new content. And we, the Trojan family, come to play in New Jersey. I'll be sure to be the loudest one in the stadium. Fight on," with a little fight on emoji.
All right, what a review. Thank you so much.
Very cool. And then we also have AJK 2020. "Join the Trojan party," with a fight on emoji. He says, "I don't even listen to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, but y'all always make my day with them. So I want to show my appreciation. I've been a USC fan my entire life, and you guys are hands down the best place to get my USC updates. I appreciate what you guys do. Fight on." Well, thanks for that. Not even an Apple Podcast listener, and went over to Apple Podcasts to leave us a rating. So thank you.
Yeah, so kind. Thank you.
Very, very, very cool. I just also want to thank, we're thanking people, Trader Joe's for all the many years of sponsorship of the Peristyle Podcast. Are you an air fryer guy, Connor?
Yes, I am.
Do you like using the air fryer?
Makes it a lot easier cooking a lot of different things, so yes.
It is cool, and I got one of these ones that you kind of fold up, and I love it. But I'm looking at new stoves, new ranges, and a lot of them have air frying capabilities in the stove too. So I'm always looking for kind of things like, what can I throw in the air fryer? And I looked over TraderJoe's.com, and they have these root vegetable fries. So they're multicolored fries, different root vegetables, but you can go right into the air fryer with them. So seasoned and already cut and ready to go. So I'm like, something like that is like very cool because, man, you can knock those out quick. Like, it doesn't take long to prepare as far as like preheat or anything. Something right from a bag into an air fryer. Like, I've made fries before, which is cool, but you got to like cut the potatoes, soak them in water. There's a process like to be able to just kind of put right from the bag into the air fryer. So I definitely want to try these out. Root vegetable fries. So go check them out over at Trader Joe's.
Sounds healthy. We make a lot of salmon in the air fryer, little salmon bites. Those are delicious. Chicken. For Yom Kippur the other night, my girlfriend's Jewish. We made latkes in there. So you can really do anything.
Yeah. That's cool. And a lot of cool stuff from the frozen section of Trader Joe's you can like pop on in there. All right. I guess we have a little bit of breaking news. If you care about the AP poll, that's the most important one. USC did drop 3 spots. But I mean, having 4 Pac-12 teams in the AP poll is pretty impressive. And if you look at number 7 Washington, they had they've been looking really good on offense there. You got USC, Oregon coming in at number 9, and Utah at number 10. USC plays all those teams, plus number 11, Notre Dame. So, I mean, did the rankings matter that much? You're playing 4 teams that are around you. So, yes, like if you beat all those teams, you're going to go way up, And there were some impressive wins ahead. Ohio State gets a win at Notre Dame. Florida State has 2 big wins on their schedule, winning at Clemson and LSU. Penn State's been looking good and stuff. So there's, Texas has a win over Alabama. Georgia and Michigan are at the top, even though they haven't beat anybody. But I don't think the rankings matter that much. But just knowing that all these teams in the Pac-12 and Notre Dame are ranked high, USC has an opportunity to beat all of those teams. And if they do, then you're going to be, one of the top teams in the country for sure.
It's all ahead of the Trojans, 4-0. They control their destiny. Like you said, Ryan, the schedule is really tough, and we see it in the AP poll. But I don't think they played particularly well against Arizona State. I get them dropping 3 spots. The strength of schedule, I think, is the easiest out of anyone in the top 25. I believe I saw that on Twitter. So once USC gets going and plays some more difficult teams, Colorado this week, of course, is probably the toughest one they've had so far, even though they just got beat pretty good by Oregon. USC, they have the chance to sort things out, and if they do win all these games, you're right. They could even vault into maybe the top 2.
Yeah, the opportunity is there, so just haven't had to play anyone super tough yet. Also want to let everyone know we will do a little meetup in Boulder on Friday night if you're going to be around. We should be able to get there about 6 p.m. The Utah-Oregon State game is on Friday night, so make sure you go check that out. But it's a bar called the Dark Horse. All the feedback I got, so thanks to Adam Munster-Tiger for suggesting it. I called over there. We can't really reserve an area because it's a really popular bar, but we'll try to get people there and meet up, watch the Oregon State-Utah game, and just kind of hang out and have a few beers, grab some food, and talk USC football. Very informal, so make sure you go check it out. So Blackie Chan says he's coming in from Minnesota. Hopefully you can make it over there to the Dark Horse. It's supposed to be a really cool venue and stuff. So people that are from there said, yeah, you picked a good spot. So we'll try to meet up over there, and it should be a lot of fun.
My first meetup. Looking forward to it.
Yes, and it's good. It's just very informal. This isn't like you need a ticket. You just like go in there, order what you want to eat, drink. So we're just, it's not like we have a room reserved or anything. We had a cool one in Tempe. Unfortunately, Connor, I booked his flight for Saturday instead of Friday, but Shotgun was there and Jack Smith was there. And Trevor Booth, who wrote for the site before, lives in Arizona. He came out. But we had a lot of people come out in Tempe. That was boondocks in Old Town Scottsdale. So that was a lot of fun. So try to do these. These meetups are kind of fun if you're just in from out of town or whatever and you just want to talk with other USC fans. Make sure you go check that out.
Looking forward to my first one. We had such a nice time in the off season, Ryan, doing a couple fan meetups before the year started. So it's been really great so far and looking forward to it.
Yeah, looking forward to it as well. So check that out. We want to talk, we're not going to dive into the whole deep dive on what's going on with USC and Arizona State. We're going to talk about some of the stuff that's going on. But I think the general theme, Connor, there was, when I posted this, it was more about there's a lot of concern out there. Now, we did a tunnel vision show. Actually did 2. Make sure you check out Brendan Rice. We did a tunnel vision show with him. Let me show you that touchdown that he had. That was pretty cool. One of the 2 touchdowns. Leads the team in touchdowns right now. He's sort of my X factor for this game, having played at Colorado and, leading the team in touchdowns. I think that's, that's an important aspect too. But, looking at this team right now, the sort of theme was, should you be worried? And when we did our show on Sunday, by the way, I wouldn't recommend being worried about, something you can't really control. But, that's just me being a psychologist or whatever. But when we talked on Sunday, I think a lot of people felt we were being there were people who are really upset after the game. They were mad and they were just like, everyone sucks and this team's going to lose every game. And we're sort of like, look, relax. It's going to be fine. And then I did a show with Harvey Hyde and he was, on Monday, maybe a lot more critical of some. And then a lot of people were like, oh, that's being too negative or whatever. So I think there's definitely fans on both sides of this aisle, Connor, that are about, doom and gloom, everything sucks, they're never going to win another game, to, don't worry about it, they're 4-0, you go in on the road and all that kind of stuff. I would kind of want to get your thoughts on this. I've had a couple, I know you got to rewatch the game. Thoughts on sort of like where the state of where this USC team is and areas that you might have for, concern.
Sure. A few interesting things. Like I said on Sunday, I'm not too concerned about the offense. Bunch of penalties, a lot by the offensive line. Caleb Williams, he had 3 turnover-worthy plays, according to Pro Football Focus, which is tied for his career high going back to his freshman year. So he made a few mistakes that were uncharacteristic. With Lincoln Riley, with Caleb Williams, with all the experience on the offensive line, even though they don't have a lot of experience together, the receivers being so good, it's just going to work itself out. I'm not really that concerned about the offense. I think on the road in the future, they'll work on getting those plays in faster. They'll make adjustments. Lincoln Riley, we all know how good he is as an offensive coach. Not too worried about that. Defensively, after rewatching the game, a little bit more concern there. The only way ASU was going to beat USC was by scoring touchdowns, and the Sun Devils score 3. The one that Drew Pine threw to Elijah Badger with Sierra Wright in single coverage, nice play. Yeah, you probably want Wright to cover a little better there, but they beat you. That's fine. The 2 other touchdowns were really, really big mistakes and really concerning, especially last year when USC struggled so much defensively. The first one, Cam Scadaboo, 3rd and 10 on the USC 15 after the Marshawn Lloyd, Caleb Williams bad exchange fumble. It's a 3rd and 10, and Alex Grinch, he's known for being so aggressive. Kenny Dillingham knows he's aggressive. He brings pretty much everyone. Even safety Kalen Bullock gets sucked up a little bit. And what happens? Scadaboo bounces a run to the left outside the tackle and scores a 15-yard touchdown. I thought that play call was really, really bad because the only way, like I said, ASU can beat a team like USC with such a good offense is scoring touchdowns. And what do? 3rd and 15, or 3rd and 10 from the 15, you give up a touchdown. And then the one in the fourth quarter when Scadaboo broke those 2 tackles, that was obviously a really big mistake by Eric Gentry and Max Williams too. So it was shades of last season where you question the coaching staff a little bit, you question the execution. And I think defensively you have to be a little bit concerned because it looked like last year.
Yeah, and I think what you can say, though, is that there's things that this defense does well.
Yeah.
And, they get after the quarterback well. I think a guy like Bear Alexander, I thought, Kenny Dillingham did a really good job calling plays early, sort of taking advantage of the aggression that you knew the USC defensive front would bring. Finishing with 14 tackles for loss, 8 sacks, even though a lot of them were late. It's still fourth quarter of the game was close. It's not like fourth quarter sacks don't count because the game was close. Those count as much as anything else. But I would say, they do some things really well. And if you go to an analogy, like when people say something like, whatever, the stars aligned, and sometimes just things happen. And I feel like this was sort of a stars aligned game. You could look at USC against Stanford, like everything aligned for USC in the first half, right? They just go 49-3. Like everything sort of worked. Nothing didn't work. It was like perfect. And when you saw Oregon play Colorado, they had the right motivation. There was like the stars kind of aligned. So they were going to get blitzkrieged and just blown away. And I feel like it didn't work to like ASU winning the game, but a lot of stuff aligned where they were, they ran the weird pooch punt thing that you punted and then nobody was there. And then USC puts somebody back and then they get the first down and, taking advantage of the aggression, sort of making Grinch back off a little bit. It just seemed like whatever, and Dillingham just threw everything at it. It still wasn't enough to win, but it made it a lot closer than people think. And to me, it felt like one of those sort of stars aligning games. And sometimes you make it's almost like making your own luck. Like you could go to work if you're going to some office building and, say you hit snooze a couple of times and now you're a little bit late and you're parking on a different floor and, I didn't get to my meeting on time. And you go like, well, it didn't work out for me today. Well, you also hit snooze twice, but you could be getting there a little bit early. And for some reason there's like a conference and you had to park upstairs and the elevator wasn't working. So, there's things that aren't in your control. And sometimes it's a combination of both. And I feel like this is sort of like a combination of things. Like USC did some stuff that was sloppy. They weren't getting plays in on time. They were trying to change the play too much. But ASU came to play. Like it was a night and day. If you want to say this is the way ASU is, they might not look like that again for a while. Like Drew Pine is out now, but they look like absolute garbage against Fresno State. But it's a different game. It's a different team. It's a different situation. So to me, it's kind of like I didn't want people to just be jumping off buildings because USC sucks and Arizona State, they gave up 28 points and Fresno State didn't give up any. So that was kind of the way it was. But I feel like it was kind of like this stars aligned sort of thing where it just, things, and some of it was in USC's control that they screwed up. And then some stuff just Arizona State did way better than what they had done earlier in the year, if that makes sense.
Definitely. And a lot of the trick plays, like that pooch punt throw, what a throw by Scadaboo. Probably a play you'll never see again. A lot of the trick stuff didn't lead directly to points. It kept the ball kept ASU with the ball and extended drives, and they kicked field goals. I believe there was maybe a trick play or two on the Sierra Wright touchdown when he was in coverage. But the 2 touchdowns that I referenced earlier, that was just straight up one-on-one football. That was Scadaboo rushing for 15 on 3rd and 10, and then Scadaboo breaking 2 tackles on a 4th and 7, I think, for a 53-yard touchdown. So 2 touchdowns, nothing to do with trick plays on those 2 drives, and I think that's where the concern was. People kind of get up in arms like the USC defense was better than it looked because all those trick plays, other teams won't throw the kitchen sink at them, and that's true. Some of the trick plays you won't see in the future, and it's tough to defend those when you don't know they're coming. ASU executed really well. The kitchen sink was thrown at USC. That's all fair. But on the 2 touchdown drives I mentioned, that was just straight-up football, and USC didn't look very good.
Yeah, I would agree with that. We have a bunch of comments on YouTube about it. I want to address this one. So do you think Grinch's job is on the line? In fact, if the stars don't align and Colorado scores more than 6 points, I don't think Lincoln Riley's firing any, defensive coordinators changes aren't happening. But I do want to talk about sort of what he talked about yesterday when we were at practice. And he used, I like my food analogies. He was using a lot of different sports analogies. And I think listening to what he has to say, and Connor, I think you wrote about this too, make sure you go check that out over at uscfootball.com. But it was when he's sort of describing what, the baseball analogy where like you get a lot of strikeouts and you're not walking a lot of guys. And, but then you look at your ERA and it's high, and I think that was sort of like it's kind of an interesting thought process of what he's thinking where, hey, if you're forcing a lot of negative plays and you're getting after the quarterback and you're creating pressure, the end of the day, though, it matters. They still scored 28 points. And to your point, the only thing you can't do is give up touchdowns. And they kept giving up touchdowns. It seems like this is a team that creates a lot. I think they're 3rd in the country in like havoc plays or chaos plays, but they give up the big play. They give up that explosive play. And a lot of times it leads to opponent touchdowns. And when I don't know what sort of metrics that like Alex Grinch and Lincoln Riley and they use, but from what he said, to me it sounded like I have like these metrics. Like if I'm giving you a job review, like, okay, Connor, you've been with us like 3 months, and I have like a bunch of things to check off. Like, okay, so I want to make sure you get this many stories done, and these are on time, and this, not a lot of typos or whatever it is, and I check all these things off, and like somehow the numbers are terrible, and like it looks like you did everything right, but like nobody's reading your stories, and that's the feeling I got when Alex Grinch was saying, like, I have these metrics, and like we got after the quarterback, we did this, and they still scored 28 points, and I think that's sort of where it was like, it was almost like him saying like, hey, I'm doing what I want to do, and they still scored points. Does that make sense? Kind of a long description there.
I would need to go back and listen to the quote. I saw another reporter tweeted that clip, and Twitter was going crazy with it. They were all kind of laughing at Alex Grinch, and they didn't really love that analogy. I get what you're saying, and that makes sense. I don't know. I don't love crossing sports, so
okay.
if we can stick to football, I think that would be better. But I get it. Like they did the little things well, and maybe they gave up a couple homers and they gave up 2 runs, and their ERA is a little higher than you'd think after striking out 8 or 9 and going 7 innings or whatever. I don't know. I just think, by and large, overall, the grand scheme of things, why people are so frustrated after that game is because it goes back to what I said earlier. It just looked a little bit similar to last season when you missed all those tackles. I think you ranked number 120 in the country in missed tackles, way down. Not what USC should be doing, a team with all that talent. You have more talent on defense this year. So, yeah, while your ERA might be a little higher and you're doing a lot of the things correctly, why don't you have a low ERA and do more things correctly, I guess would be my response.
No, I agree with you there. It's one of those things. Yeah, it's like, oh, well, that was a pass ball. And, it's like, okay, pass balls happen. Or that, oh, I got a balk and he went over. And then, then someone hits the 3-run homer. And you're like, oh. So, you only give up one hit, but somehow they scored 3 runs.
He also was talking about basketball, and he said at some point you got to make the shot. Like, you got to make the tackle. He compared tackling to making a basket, which I thought was interesting too. He watched the video if you haven't seen it yet on YouTube. He was filled with similes and metaphors and sports comparisons. To his credit, it was pretty interesting. Sometimes you don't get a lot from Grinch in those press conference settings, but he had a lot to say yesterday.
He does. I mean, I give him credit. He talks. I mean, he'll tell you like what's on his mind and what they need to do better. And just because you tackle good one week doesn't mean you can rest on your laurels. You got to tackle again the next week. So I kind of feel like there's going to be a bounce back in this one. And with Colorado, Shedeur Sanders is great. He gets sacked a lot. He got sacked 7 times last week with Oregon. To his credit, he's still in there. USC sacks Drew Pine 8 times and he's out. It's one of those things where, Colorado's not really good at running the ball. USC was having a hard time kind of stopping the run sometimes. If they give up a bunch of rushing yards to Colorado, that's probably a bad sign. But, what Colorado does well, they'll probably make some big plays in the passing game. But USC is going to force probably a bunch of negative plays. And so I feel like this is going to be a pretty good bounce back. I think both teams are going to bounce back. Like Colorado's not as bad as we saw at Oregon. They're going to have a huge crowd, 9 a.m. Who knows what's going to happen with that. And then USC, I think, is going to play better than what they did too. But USC is just a lot more talented. I think they're going to have advantages on both lines. So I wouldn't compare it like, USC didn't beat Colorado as bad as Oregon did. Well, Oregon was home. Like I said, like there's sort of stars aligned against Colorado in that one. I mean, some of the pregame talk, Oregon put out a video afterwards, and some of the pregame mess that some of the players were talking, including Shiloh Sanders, Deion, one of Deion's sons. I mean, there was some stuff. There were definitely, Dan Lanning was motivated, or Landanning, like we like to call him on the podcast of champions, but Landanning was motivated, and that team was motivated. And so we saw last week like a USC team that didn't seem all that motivated. I'm curious if there was any sort of look ahead to this game. I feel like they're going to be motivated knowing how, they played kind of poorly. Caleb Williams had a bad game, even though he's counted for 5 touchdowns. And I feel like they're going to play a lot better. And I think if USC plays a lot better and Colorado plays a lot better, it's probably going to help USC, not as much Colorado.
The one area I'm looking at in USC Colorado is the touchdowns when you're on defense. How many touchdowns are you giving up defensively? Because like I said, the only way some of these teams who aren't as talented as you can beat you is by scoring touchdowns because your offense is so good. We know USC is going to put up a bunch of points. Against Arizona State, the offense, Lincoln Riley said, I was about as disappointed as you can be in an offense that averaged 9 yards per play. He wasn't happy, and USC still put up 42 points. So the only way teams can beat you is if they're scoring with you because we know USC is going to score a lot. And then against San Jose State in the first game, USC gives up 4 touchdowns. Against Arizona State, it's 3 touchdowns. Can you get off the field? I don't care how you do it, if it's a turnover, if it's a 4th down stop, if you make a team punt. Can you hold teams to 3 points? Can you hold opponents to no touchdowns and just limit their opportunities? If Colorado scores 3 touchdowns, I think USC will not only win, but they'll cover the spread. So that's sort of what I'm looking at. Can you limit the opposing team, a strong offense, a good offense in Colorado, even though they're without their top receiver and Travis Hunter? Can you limit them to not score as many touchdowns as you've led up the past couple of games? I mean, 3 against Arizona State. If you allow 3 again against Colorado, I think that's going to be okay because Colorado's defense is worse. So just limiting the explosive plays that lead to touchdowns, limiting the touchdowns in general is my big concern.
Yeah, I just showed, if you're watching on YouTube, the Kalen Bullock interception was really nice. You know, there's some high level plays. It's almost like I'm my golf game. I'm better as a scramble player, because I can hit the really good drive and like I can hit, stick something on the green, but then I can also shank one sideways. So if you're playing your own ball the whole time, it's like, okay, there's gonna be some blow up holes and stuff. But if you're playing on a scramble team, you just kind of get these high level plays. If I screw up, there's someone else to kind of fix this. Like you don't really have that luxury. It's great if you get that amazing interception and get after the quarterback and make a bunch of sacks, but you have to be on every play because if that one you don't hit, that shank out of bounds becomes a touchdown for the other team. And I feel like that's sort of, it's great to make the big play. And they've made some for sure on defense. I think they're better than they were last year, but you can't give up those big plays too. And it's sort of like you need to, have some sort of balance where it's not just, feast or famine, where it's like, oh, big play, oh crap, give up a big play, and I feel like that's what we've been seeing a lot from this USC defense.
Mm-hmm. And the first Arizona State touchdown, when Alex Grinch blitzes and even Kalen Bullock comes up too far as the free safety, that was USC expecting a pass and going for a sack or a turnover, a big play, when if you just get off the field there and let them kick a field goal, you're still winning 7-3. You overcome a turnover in your own red zone by only letting up 3 points. The second ASU recovered that fumble, you could pretty much give them 3 points. So the worst case scenario was the touchdown. And then what do? You be way too aggressive on that third down. Kenny Dillingham outsmarts you. Go for the big play. It doesn't work. They score a touchdown. It's worst case scenario.
Yeah. Blackie Chan brought up Drew Pine did play against USC last year. So that's part of like the stars align thing. He played for Notre Dame. Obviously, they had a better run game, better defense, better offensive line and all that. But the week before, ASU had to play like 4 quarterbacks. Like everyone was hurt. And Lincoln Riley mentioned this, like Drew Pine was going to be the guy. He prepared all week to be the guy. He's already have confidence playing USC last year. Like there's a bunch of things that sort of lined up to let him do well. Arizona State, they're kind of screwed. The guy that he was preparing, and he's out now. So, they've had a bunch of injury situations that sort of like came together where they were fairly healthy for one game, and it was against USC. So I'm not saying you shouldn't be concerned at all. I usually say that. Don't be concerned. You don't control the stuff. But if you're like worried that USC is going to give up, the defense really isn't as good as you were hoping, I could see, there's some reasons to be concerned, but there's also more realistic reasons too to be like, all right, like this isn't going to happen every week. They're going to play way better offenses. I think you can take more away from playing, when you play, maybe even in Arizona's offense, we'll see like they can be up and down, but the teams on the schedule that are ranked, if they play and win at Notre Dame, I don't really care how many points they give up. You just want to get the win, and I feel like you can be more judgy or whatever if you want with some of those better teams. This was a weird one, the first road game and all that kind of stuff.
I look at it a little bit differently. I think against those ranked teams, like you said, it's win at all costs, but I don't really care about style points as long as you beat those really good ranked teams. I care a little bit more about style points against an Arizona State, against maybe even a Colorado. How it looks, I think, is important. Obviously, it's how it looks is always important, but how it looks against those not as talented teams can reveal a little bit. And then when you go against those bigger teams, okay, if USC is winning some games maybe then closer than they should have, we can say, okay, I don't know how they're going to do against these bigger teams, and then we're probably going to be right if they're not winning by the margin they should, then they go on to lose. So style points early, I think you can take stuff away from them.
For sure. I would go on the offensive side of the ball. We had a comment. Marshawn is going to show out, and he did look amazing. Lincoln Riley was asked. I know people get, why don't you ask him about to run the ball more? Well, Lincoln Riley was asked about that, and he sort of was like, we ran him hard, we ran him enough, and then by the end of his answer was kind of like, we could have run him more. And I feel like sometimes you're kind of doing things for a reason as opposed to like, oh, we want to like run this play. Like USC just pretty much comes out and throws the ball a bunch of times, usually to start a game, and then they kind of get into the run game a little bit later. But what are your thoughts on sort of like the run game and if they're going to run Marshawn Lloyd and Austin Jones a little bit more in this one?
I hope they do. Colorado gives up 206 rushing yards a game, which is 10th worst in the nation. Shout out to Muscle031 on the Peristyle for that statistic. He started a thread. So Marshawn Lloyd, he's averaging, I think, like 9 yards a carry. He averaged 11 against Arizona State. This, in theory, is one of the worst defenses you're going to play the rest of the season against the run. So he should be let loose a little bit more. I do think that Lincoln Riley has learned a little bit of a lesson this year about running more because Marshawn Lloyd's so good, and every time they have run, good things have happened. You never want to take the ball out of your Heisman Trophy winner's hands. I get that, and Lincoln Riley, he trusts his quarterback as much as a coach can trust a quarterback. It's an infinite amount of the trust that he has in his QB, so I get it. He wants to let Caleb drop back as much as he can. Totally fine. Caleb is one of the best quarterbacks of all time. I get it. But I think USC is a better running team than a lot of people thought to begin the season. Marshawn Lloyd is better than a lot of people thought, I think, as well. And against Colorado, a team that isn't very good against the run, you got to rush this guy who has been incredible. He just keeps getting better every week, Marshawn Lloyd. He's one of the 2 players, him and Caleb Williams, who have been on the top 6 for PFF grades every week. He is incredible, and I think he has a big game. He's the easy pick for the MVP against Colorado, I think.
Yeah, I think you got to run him a little bit more, and we'll see. But I think in general, Lincoln Riley wasn't very happy with the offense. They had a touchdown called back because of, Taj Washington was blocking before the play. The fourth down there in the red zone where it was just miscommunication looked like, or just something was off with Michael Jackson. They didn't get that one done. They just left I think they left a bunch of points out there. And of course, the fumbled exchange between Caleb Williams and Marshawn Lloyd that led to Arizona State's first point. I don't anticipate that's going to be the case in Colorado. Now, the atmosphere is going to be a lot, I think, is tough or tougher than what we saw in Tempe. But that was a good crowd. There was sold out. There's going to be people excited for this one. Now, it's 9 a.m, so maybe there are not as many drunk people as you get for a 7:30 game in the desert. But yeah, I think this is going to be a tough environment. So I'm curious to see just sort of how this team looks pre-snap, because that just seemed to me to be the biggest problem. Like, they were getting to the line and it didn't seem like they were sure. And I would much rather just see them, hey, run whatever play was called, and it's like it's on 3. When I clap, whatever it is, snap the ball and just run the play. Especially against a bad defense. Like, don't worry about I got to get into the perfect play. If you were going to hand it off to Marshawn Lloyd and there's an extra linebacker in the box that you didn't expect, still hand it off to him. It just maybe the percentage play is to do this, but you were losing percentage points by not being able to switch cleanly. So I want to see pre-snap is how clean does this offense look? Does everyone look like they're on the same page? Is the play coming in fast? Because we saw this pretty much against Oregon State. The pre-snap stuff was bad, and they were a better defense. So even if you get into the play, it was going to be hard. I feel like in this, just once they got into the play against Arizona State, things worked. Just get into the play against Colorado. Don't screw yourself up with getting false starts and having to call timeouts and all that stuff. Like all that stuff we saw last weekend.
Gerard wrote in his takeaways, I thought it was really smart. You want to balance getting the perfect play with getting a good play in time, because if you are taking too long, like you said, Ryan, the penalties could lead to a false start, could lead to a delayed game. Both things we saw happen against Arizona State. Trying to find that perfect play isn't always the best case scenario for a team, especially on the road when it might be a little louder than I think USC expected. You're so talented on offense, to your point. If you just run any play, there's a really good chance it's going to work out, unless, the defense is obviously doing something that you need to check out of. But I think they were getting a little bit too cute against Arizona State. They didn't necessarily need to check out from a lot of those plays because the talent gap is just so wide. If you just do what you do against Arizona State, the announcers of the game on Fox kept saying, USC wouldn't trade anyone on their team for someone on ASU. If you're that much better than the other team, just do what you do. It's probably going to work.
Yeah. Was it the paralysis by analysis sort of thing where you're talking like at some point you can make as many, do you want to have a meeting to plan what you're going to do in the meeting? Do you want to plan, like how much planning do you need to do? Sometimes you just got to do it, just execute and do it. And I felt like there was just so much sort of like pre-game, like pre-snap planning, like figure this out, like just freaking run the play and you're probably going to be all right.
And what was so crazy on the first drive, it's 3rd and 20. And I was like, okay, they probably won't pick this up. And then they do, and they go on to score a touchdown. That was about as bad of a start as you can possibly have. ASU, the place is rocking. Not one penalty, but 2, 3rd and 20. You're in your own red zone, and what happens? Zachariah Branch catches a big play. They can overcome some of these mistakes against better teams, though. I don't think you want to be putting yourself in those holes.
Exactly.
That's obvious.
Yeah, and Herman pointed out that the offense wasn't in sync in Arizona State and scored 42.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
Yeah, like that was a bad offensive day. Like just think about like Clay Helton days and that kind of stuff. Like what a bad offensive day would look like. No, that's talking like 4 or 5 turnovers and all that. This was a sloppy day. Not Caleb Williams' best. He had 5 touchdowns. So I mean, that's sort of just like, yeah, what are you going to do? All right. Anything else sort of on that one before we kind of move on, or we got
my biggest takeaways were, I think, to the defensive line. It looks like you have those rotations locked in. In the secondary, it looks like Christian Roland Wallace is starting to play a little bit. We even saw Jacoby Covington. It looks like those rotations are pretty set. I would like to see more Zion Branch. Maybe that injury he suffered as a freshman, he's back now, but maybe it's like a 2-year thing where he's going to be a lot better next year and you just need more time. So ideally, I'd like to see another safety get into the mix with Max Williams and Bryson Shaw. I just think your linebacker rotations are still up in the air. It looks like the staff really likes Gentry, Cobb, and Tackett Curtis when they're all available. The 2 games where they've all been available, San Jose State, Arizona State, we've seen a couple of mistakes. I just wonder down the line if we're going to see some change at the linebacker spots because it looks like you have your rotation set up everywhere else.
Yeah, that's I think we're going to get some linebacker questions and stuff too, so we'll probably get to that in a bit. Quickly looking ahead to Colorado, it's sort of been when some of the pregame talk going into this Oregon game when Colorado was undefeated and ranked. Oregon a top 10 team. There seemed to be a lot of barbs and stuff flying around. Lincoln Riley yesterday was very complimentary of Deion Sanders, says he hasn't met yet, but looking forward to it. How he's been good for the game and all that kind of stuff. And it sounds like from what I've heard from Deion Sanders too, very complimentary of what Lincoln Riley and USC have been doing. So I think both coaches or both programs, and not that USC was getting involved in this kind of stuff anyway. That's not really their style. That's not Lincoln Riley's style. But sort of like getting into this of just there wasn't going to be any bulletin board material like I think we saw in the Oregon-Colorado game.
What did the build-up to that game look like? Because didn't Dan Lanning not do much? And then once they put their foot on the gas, the pregame hype speech that he gave starts to leak out. And I feel like they didn't do a lot of talking. And then after the game, they did a ton of talking. So I think USC, they were never going to do any talking. If anyone did talk like that, talk trash, Lincoln Riley would not be happy. It's not how they operate over there. And I think the difference between a USC and Oregon, if USC does go out and perform really well and get a big win, you won't see any of that talk afterwards. So I think we can learn a lot about what happens after. As for Oregon, Ryan, you mentioned the mess that they were talking, Colorado, the mess that they were talking before the Oregon game. I think they probably learned their lesson. Maybe being at home, they might talk a little bit of trash, but I don't anticipate, they were humbled. I think they're going to learn from all that trash they talked, because you could argue USC is better than Oregon, and USC maybe will have a similar performance. Yeah,
Oregon had this, I think it was like a 6-minute video almost that they produced from the win. But they had their own camera crew. Deion Sanders has got 3 different shows following around, so many cameras, everything. That'll be kind of a fun spectacle to see when we go to Boulder. But Oregon kind of did their own thing, put a bunch of production value into it. They had cameras on the field pregame, and Shiloh Sanders goes over and starts talking trash about how they're going to beat everybody. I mean, it was I forget exactly what he said, but it was not complimentary towards Oregon. We're going to kick your ass kind of stuff. And this was to the Oregon camera. So then they get to play that in their video after the game. This is what Colorado was saying, and here's what we did to them. It was 13-0 in the first half, and Oregon's deep in their own territory and runs a fake punt, and they were coming out swinging the entire time. This was try to score a touchdown every single play. And that's really what the Ducks were focused on. And it just, Colorado wasn't ready for it. And man, it just snowballed and stuff. But
a lot of our listeners don't like Oregon and Dan Lanning. I get it, but you have to admit, from a recruiting standpoint, they played that perfectly. They knew all the eyes were going to be on them. They routed Colorado. All the hype video, everything was in place. Yeah, love or hate Oregon, they really did a good job with that, I thought. When they had the spotlight on them, they performed really well. And if you're a high school kid, you're watching that, how can you not be at least interested if Oregon's interested in you?
Yeah. All right. Well, why don't we do this? Let's take a quick break. We will have a preview show for more details about USC and Colorado. Thursday Night Tunnel Vision, I think it'll be me, Connor, and Jack, if I'm not mistaken. So that will go up in podcast form as well. If you're listening to the podcast or if you're on our YouTube channel, that will be live there, live on Facebook, live on Twitter as well. So more of a preview. And we'll have a whole bunch more preview stuff going up on uscfootball.com. I do my 5 questions in exchange, which are always a fun feature where we'll ask the publisher of the opposing site some questions about their team. So Adam Munster-Tiger does a great job covering Colorado. So I'm exchanging questions with him, and we'll get into more details of all that kind of stuff, what's going on the site. So make sure you go check that out. But we're going to take a quick break, and we will come back and start answering your questions. Back in a minute. All righty, we're back here on the Peristyle Podcast, talking USC football, of course. That's what we do. Connor, you're liking talking USC football, huh?
Loving it.
Good.
I love doing these podcasts.
And that's, I mean, it's one of I think one of the appealing things when we brought Connor over, who'd only been covering the team, since the beginning of January, just the ability to do these shows. So hopefully you guys are enjoying them. They're a lot of fun to do. We try to give you a variety of guests and information and formats where some are just audio only, some are video, some are live. Some take voicemails, some have live calls, all that kind of fun stuff. So we try to give you a variety. So if you didn't like me, then listen to one of the shows that I'm not on. Or if you don't like Connor, listen to one of the shows he's not on. We get there stuff like that. So we give you like lots of variety, hopefully. And we appreciate everyone coming in. We have a couple hundred people watching live on YouTube. So thank you for doing that. All right, we got a bunch of questions to get to.
3 simple words.
You've got mail.
Woohoo!
Woohoo! I love it. Why don't we go voicemail? This was one we just got earlier, so I'm going to play this one for you.
Hello, Ryan. This is Thomas from Malibu. Just got done listening to Coach Harvey Hyde and several callers following the Arizona State game. Maybe I'm missing something. Are we 0-4 or 1-3? I know I'm getting up in age. Maybe I'm not paying attention and adding the 4 quick enough. But last time I checked, we're 4-0. We got Colorado on Saturday. We got Arizona. And then really, quite frankly, we got the stretch of the 4 big games that are going to make or break the season. Coach Hyde, listen, I love listening to you, but let's be clear. Lincoln Riley knows what he's doing. We don't need every second of every day to be second-guessing this guy. For crying out loud, they didn't look good against Arizona State. Lincoln said it. Anyone who watched Stevie Wonder can watch that game and know USC looked horrible.
Jake Olson.
But let's not jump to conclusions after 60 minutes, okay? We were not as great as we thought we were after the Stanford game, and we're certainly not as bad as we think we are after the Arizona State game. So, Coach Hyde and fellow Peristyle Podcast fans, tap the brakes a little bit. Let's see what happens on Saturday. I have a good feeling that maybe this was a little bit of a wake-up call on Saturday, and our Trojans are going to come out on fire on Saturday up at Folsom Field. Anyway, Thomas from Malibu, great show. Thank you for all you do, Ryan. Fight on.
Great call, Thomas. And I agree. And I think that's what I tried to convey on our Sunday night show, is just like, it's not as bad as you feel right now. And just like USC beating Stanford wasn't as good as that. Like, Stanford actually almost won the game. It should have beat Arizona when they were playing at home. It's just week to week is going to be a little bit different. And sometimes, like we talk about, like the stars sort of align. So yes, I would say pump the brakes a little bit when it comes to the sky is falling and everything's, going to hell in a handbasket.
For all the talk about Lincoln Riley's defenses over the years, the guy's 70-13 in his career as a head coach. More often than not, you're winning the games that you should win. Pretty much always, you're going to win the games you should win. Look at last year. You probably should have beaten Tulane, but there was a recipe to beat USC last year, just have a really good offense, and their defense kind of tumbled at the end there. But 70-13. A lot of coaches are not doing that well, and just the wins that this guy's able to have, I agree. You got to give him the benefit of the doubt. Questions about the defense for sure. I would be shocked if USC lost against Colorado this week. Someone talked about firing Grinch earlier in a message. I think the only way that's even on the table a little bit is if USC loses to Colorado. I do not anticipate that happening.
Yeah, and I definitely. I mean, I think what I harped for years before you were here, Connor, about just hire people that are good at their jobs. Get a good athletic director. You know why? Because they're good at their job, and let them do it instead of, well, they hired like Lynn Swan, and now you have to like question everything they do because most of the decisions were wrong, and it turned out that they were wrong. We said they were wrong when they made the decisions, and they turned out to be wrong. When you hire someone that's good at their job, they're not always going to do everything that you think is right. Like we were critical before of like, Jay, just run the play, and there was a reason, I'm sure, behind it. Now we'll see. Maybe Lincoln Riley's going to like, you know what, we could have just run the play. It would have been better than trying to figure this out with the crowd noise and our communication didn't seem to be right and stuff like that. I mean, nitpicky stuff. But at the end of the day, you're like, he's forgot more about football than I ever know. I'm defaulting to this really smart guy who's good at coaching football because he's proven it, like you said. I mean, you don't get a winning percentage like that not knowing what you're doing. So it's fine. Like we're here to like talk about everything. We're not just going to paint a rosy picture of it. We're going to be critical of things like we always are. We're just going to be critical less when you have someone that's really good at doing their job. And Lincoln Riley is certainly doing that.
And I think part of the criticisms, too, are that we have really high expectations for the team. And this should be a team that's held to the college football playoff standard. So when defensively they're making some mistakes, it's not like, oh, this team's terrible. That, what an embarrassment. It's we're trying, this team has a real chance to do something special, and we're holding them to a high standard.
Yeah. Let's go to a couple questions from Chase. He says, I feel the defense plays much better with Rajon Davis and Shane Lee rather than Mason Cobb and Tackett Curtis. Do you agree?
Well, I think the sample size is too small. We saw a lot of Rajon and Shane Lee in the Nevada game when Tackett Curtis got ejected, and you didn't have a couple of the other linebackers, and they look great. And then Rajon and Tackett started against Stanford, and they look good. I think why people are so up in arms and frustrated is Rajon Davis, in the little cameos that he's gotten throughout the years, looking back to last season against Tulane, he was one of the bright spots on the defense. In like the 6 snaps he played 6 snaps against San Jose State. I think that was 2 series where the Spartans punted on both of them, 2 3-and-outs. In the 2 games he started, he's done well. So people are like, okay, if the linebacking core isn't doing as well as we would hope, could we at least try Rajon Davis for a little bit and just see how it goes against a good opponent, give him a good run? And so just to answer the question, the sample size is too small. I don't think we know if Lee and Davis are the best because they played against an opponent that's not so talented. I think Shane Lee, I wouldn't really get too wrapped up in him playing a lot at linebacker this year, but I do think Rajon Davis has a chance, and I don't know really what it's going to take for him to play a little bit. I was surprised he didn't play against Arizona State. I think there is a chance that he's part of your best duo, but I don't know if he'll get that opportunity just with the way the coaching staff has played it so far.
I agree, and we had a voicemail about this too, so let me play it for you.
Hey, Peristyle Podcast. This is Anthony. Probably with my Twitter handle, Anthony in LA. You guys see me a lot, and I apologize if I'm too active on Twitter with your guys' accounts, but
it's okay.
Just want to get your take on, obviously, a lot of Trojan fans. We're disappointed with this last game and the use or lack of use of certain players, Rajon, Keon Bars, but just want to see, we go to the portal to, like for Bars specifically, to plug in players at deficits in our team, like run defense. And he had 9 snaps, so just want to see what you guys had your thoughts on that. Thanks so much, and fight on.
Do you want me to start, Ryan?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think with Keon Bars, I'm really not sure what's going on with him because he was one of the best players against Stanford on the defense, and then 2 weeks later he doesn't play a lot. So there must have been some matchup thing that they didn't like. He had a tweet after the game. He was frustrated. It sounded like, I don't know if that's the best way to get back onto the field if you're Keon Bars. Coach Grinch talked about how there is a chance where he'll he's part of the rotation. He'll get back in. I have no idea why he's not playing more. For the linebackers, I think going into the year, the coaching staff thought Cobb, Tackett Curtis, and Eric Gentry, those are our 3. That's what we're going to go with. They wanted to get Cobb more run as they head into the stretch run because he had been banged up, so he plays the most snaps out of anyone on the defense against ASU and is just out there a lot to get some of the rust off because he's part of their plans in the future. And nothing that they've said or that they've done really leads me to believe that they feel any differently about the linebackers. I still expect those 3 guys to play the majority of downs in the future. Lincoln Riley and Alex Grinch, they can talk about playing Rajon Davis, but until they do it, I will just take what they say with a grain of salt because actions obviously speak louder than words. Nothing that I've seen or heard leads me to believe that those 3 guys aren't going to be playing more in the future.
Yeah, we kind of got the same thing from Lincoln Riley yesterday, where you have to show us in practice and make us what was the
make it obvious.
Make it obvious in practice. But I mean, production we've seen in games, it seems I think fans have a legit point. So, but we're not there for all the meetings. We don't know. I mean, we're not sure what's going on behind the scenes. Just from looking at it, it seemed like there were some opportunities for Bars to play more and Rajon Davis to play more, especially, Mason Cobb played, I think, 70-something snaps and only had the 1 tackle. So it wasn't like the production was through the roof, and that's why you didn't get someone else off the field. Not to take shots at anybody, but you're just like, hey, that we've seen rotations in other spots. I'm not sure why there wasn't one there. So.
Yeah, and based on everything I've heard, it's an Alex Grinch decision on the playing time for those linebackers. A lot of people are like, oh, Brian Odom, why doesn't he play more? Why doesn't he play more? I think it's Grinch who gets that final call.
Jim wrote in an email, the defense harassed ASU through its pass rush, but struggled mightily against the run. While there is significantly better depth, Isn't this a warning sign to make more substantive changes to the scheme? From Jim.
Maybe. I don't think they're going to change the scheme much.
No.
They can definitely change the personnel, though. So maybe they'll watch the tape after that ASU game, and then Keon Bars, hey, we only played you 9 snaps. You probably could have done better against the run. We'll put him in more. Or, maybe at the linebacker spot, they decide to make a change, which, like I said earlier, I don't expect to happen. I don't think we'll get a scheme change, but you could definitely get personnel changes.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. Kind of along the same lines, Tulsa Trojan texted into the hotline, and I actually had to send like a back, and they were like, sorry, wrong number. And I'm like, no, it was the right number. I just didn't understand what you were saying. But just sort of no context. He just wrote, if your system doesn't allow dudes to be dudes, then your system is a joke. Let the dudes be killers and stop with the exotic fronts. But he was talking about, I followed up, and he's talking about Alex Grinch. He's not happy with the scheme. He wants dudes to be dudes, Connor. He said, holy hell, to start. So, yeah.
A lot of fans complain that it's too difficult, the scheme, and we saw Damani Jackson allow a big coverage bust in the first game against San Jose State, and then Max Williams and Alex Grinch come out and say the next day, yeah, we didn't practice that call enough, and that's why Damani, he was isolated and it made the mistake there. So I think there is a little bit something to the defense being really complicated, and that's been one of the big complaints from the Peristyle for a couple of years now, is that it's too hard. I totally get what that emailer is saying, and if you dumb it down, can you allow some of the guys who are freak athletes on that defense to play better? Maybe. Dumbing it down is probably the wrong word, but you know what I mean? Can you be a little bit more basic? Yeah. Why would he change? He hasn't changed anything in the future or in the past. I don't anticipate anything from a scheme perspective being changed down the line. Going back to what I said earlier, I think it would be personnel.
We got one from an email, Steve in Poway. Ryan, you know where Poway is?
San Diego, right?
Yeah, very good. Nice. Dear Ryan and Connor, was that a huge, quote, scataboo I saw lying on the field between a shocked Caleb Williams and an oblivious Marshawn Lloyd? As I watched the Trojans misfire, bobble, and fumble, I couldn't help wondering if it was due to, quote, A, having a week off early in the season, so early bye week, B, facing a dearth of serious competition through the first 3 games, C, playing their first road game in a pretty pumped-up ASU stadium, or D, serious execution issues that are like cracks in the Titan submersible just before it completely imploded in the North Atlantic. Your thoughts on these? And P.S., no matter where they were ranked on Saturday, USC did not play like a top 10 team this week, so no one should be shocked or upset if USC drops in the rankings, which it did. Fight on and win from Steve in Poway.
I don't know if I got all those multiple choice answers, but I think part of it was execution. Yeah. I think Scataboo is better than I thought too. I was looking at
He's really good.
I was looking at some of his advanced numbers, even going back to Sacramento State. I tweeted about Marshawn Lloyd breaking tackles. Scataboo breaks tackles at a higher rate than Marshawn Lloyd. And last year he was at Sacramento State. This year, Arizona State. He hasn't had a great running performance because there's literally nothing around him in those earlier games. ASU had some more guys back against USC, which contributed to him running better, of course. But I think he's more talented than we thought. Some of the execution wasn't there. Eric Gentry said yesterday that he took a bad angle on that fourth quarter touchdown that Scataboo had, and that contributed to the missed tackle. Max Williams, I just think that was a big mistake after that. We didn't get a chance to talk with him yesterday. So I'd say it's a combination of Scataboo being better than I thought, and then your execution just not being good enough.
Yeah, I think the execution issues like that, the first road game too, I think that had some kind of impact. There was a lot of things I feel like that had impacts on this game, but Scataboo looked like a real dude. But as a defense, you just don't want to let guys look like real dudes. We've seen good tight ends not look really good against USC, and to USC's credit, they made a good running back who made the switch from FCS to FBS. Look like a stud FBS running back, throwing the ball, running the ball, catching the ball. You don't want to do that.
Exactly. He's a good running back and maybe great in some contexts. Marshawn Lloyd is a great running back, 5-star recruit. He's the guy who should be dominating against the lesser opponents. Yeah. And then Scataboo comes out, good running back, transferred from Sacramento State. He kind of looked like a Marshawn Lloyd type. He looked like the 5-star recruit, the big-time transfer from South Carolina because your defense didn't play good enough. That's a problem.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. Let's go. We got an email from Jack in New Jersey. He's like, USC versus Colorado at noon? Really? Just a personal beef. I hate noon games. It's too early in the day. How do you guys manage to watch 9 a.m. on the West Coast? The 3:30 and 7 o'clock games are the best times. Coach Prime should be on prime time, 7 p.m. for this one. This is like his third 9 a.m. game, by the way, for Colorado.
Well, that window is great.
Yeah, it's a great window to, just I wouldn't.
A lot of people watch.
And actually, some of the players really like the window, like we talked to yesterday. It's like one of the things about having like a night game is like you get up, you do, you have to do all your stuff, and then you're waiting all day for this game to come, and you're like planning your meals, or do you take a nap or whatever. I think Riley said too, it's just like, you get up, like there's a meeting and you go, and just it's sort of like one of those things. He says, I know it's all about the Benjamins, but this is going to be the worst part of joining the Big Ten. But hell, you can't pass up the money, which of course is the root of all evil. Check in New Jersey.
I think the worst part about joining the Big Ten will be if USC gets a lot of Friday night games.
Yeah, I don't anticipate too much of that, but there'll be more earlier games. But I think it'll be a nice mix. I think you'll have less of the super late games.
They have the late windows too, and USC is one of the top programs going, so they'll get a lot of night games too, for sure.
Yeah. All right. Let's play a voicemail for you.
Yes, Don Archie from Upland, California. USC will not make the playoffs this year, and this is why. They are basically the same team as last year. They have offense but no defense, just different named defensive players who are talented but need to be coached up. Coach Grinch cannot provide that. Therefore, it would be in Coach Riley's best interest to part ways with Coach Grinch and find a defensive coach who teaches effective defensive physical football. The tackling is atrocious. The corners are very weak defenders and tacklers, as evidenced in the Arizona State game. Sorry to be so negative, but I'm not a sugarcoater. Defenses wins games.
That was a Don. Even Kyle Whittingham doesn't think defense wins games, even though he just won a 14-7 game with a pick six against UCLA over the weekend. He said offense is more important now. It is more important. And I think this can be a playoff team. They're a better team than last year. I would disagree with your assessment that it's the same on defense. They have much better players. They were this close to making the playoff with a really terrible defense last year. I think it's a better defense. Tougher schedule, but they can certainly I still feel they can make the playoff.
The beauty of this season is it's all going to play out in front of us, and if the defense looks like it did last year and just is not as good, then that's a major problem because you upgraded a lot of talent. It's a second year in Grinch's system, and then you can logically say, okay, I think we know what the problem is, even though a lot of fans already think they do know what the problem is.
Yeah.
It's way too quick to write anything off. I, after the Stanford game, was guilty of being way too high, and after this Arizona State game, I think I'm probably a little bit guilty of being way too low. Justin Dietich, he plays offense, not defense, but he said we could take away a lot more things in a game like that compared to a Stanford game where we're up 49-3 at halftime. Let's give this USC team a chance to respond. I think they deserve that with all this talent and Lincoln Riley as head coach before we really go to some of the depths of despair that caller was. I get it. You dealt with a bad defense last year. It didn't really look great against Arizona State, but this team, I think we should give them another chance right now. They're 4-0. It's all in front of them.
Yeah, I agree. And that's one of those things that maybe fans don't take into consideration a lot is you can learn a lot from your adversity. And if it's an L, like, if you remember the Tim Tebow, his impassioned speech about, we're never going to play like this again, blah, 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 blah. They lost the game, and then they came back and won the rest and won the national championship and everything. But if you can do that after a win, so you don't get an L, you don't get a little one in the loss column, and you're able to bounce back from that, I think that's something you can build the team through. So I think that's what Justin Dietich was kind of talking about. So, and you got to hope that they do that. We have some YouTube questions from the chat I will put up on the screen for you if you're watching on YouTube. Beta 1 says, saw on Twitter last week, USC will be wearing home Cardinal jerseys on the road at Colorado. Ryan, can you confirm? I know Colorado is doing a whiteout, so I was unsure if that meant the team was wearing white also. Both Connor and I have no clue. We're not uniform people. I'm definitely not. When people ask me like what color socks they're going to wear, are they changing their shoelaces? I never know that kind of stuff. So I'm sorry. That's not something I get into.
Same here.
Okay. Let's go to Tim. I'm sorry. Someone might have that, but I just will not. Do you think Corey Foreman will transfer or just get his degree and pursue other things? Yeah, we haven't really seen anything from Corey Foreman.
Well, I mean, I think he can get his degree and transfer. I think he'll do both.
Yeah, I think that's probably the right option there. We'll see, but it just doesn't seem like it's working out there. Let's go to Johnny. He has 2 points for Saturday. One, will Riley attack Colorado's poor rush defense? And will Grinch allow Colorado's anemic rush offense to gain chunks of yards on SC's defense?
Yes to the first thing, and the second thing we'll see. He'll try not to,
yeah,
of course. That's one of the biggest things. Colorado has not been a very good running team on either side of the ball, defending it and rushing the ball when they have it. So if they're moving it on USC, I think you have to be concerned with that running back and that offensive line. They haven't been very good. Shedeur Sanders, if he beats you a little bit here and there, he's the best quarterback you've played this year. That's okay. Of course, the USC fans will say, "Oh, that's not okay," but he's a good player. The running back, while he was a highly rated recruit, they haven't been able to do anything.
He's a freshman. Yeah,
if they can do it against you, that's not a good sign.
100%. Let's go to Joe. Thanks for all the questions and comments and stuff in YouTube, by the way. That's great. Joe says, "How do we envision the cornerback play to fare versus Shedeur Sanders?"
Great question, Dave.
It is a great question.
Dave, so Christian Roland Wallace has played a lot more these last two games. He, of course, was suspended against Nevada, so you kind of have to throw that out. We don't know how much he would have played if he hadn't have been in that first half. But against Stanford, he played a little bit more than Damani Jackson. Against Arizona State, he played over Sierra Wright. Jacoby Covington has even played a little bit. I do think we'll see all four guys in this game. I wouldn't be surprised if it was Damani Jackson and Christian Roland Wallace getting the start against Colorado because Sierra Wright wasn't fantastic against Arizona State. It's really competitive. If he loses his job because Christian Roland Wallace played well and Wright didn't last game, that wouldn't shock me. And overall, I think that might be your best duo. I expect them to take some lumps because this Colorado passing attack is really good, but I think that might be your best option, those two, and I could see him performing pretty well.
I love it. Okay. Blackie Chan, who do you think will be the impact player on both sides of the ball? We sort of kind of gave the offensive one away.
Do you have anyone outside of Marshawn Lloyd? I mean, Brendan Rice continues to play really well, but I look at Marshawn Lloyd for sure for me on offense.
It's tough, yeah. Marshawn Lloyd, I think he's going to run the ball very effectively. I do like Brendan Rice in this one. I mean, it's his second week in a row, homecoming.
And no Travis Hunter.
Yeah, no Travis Hunter to try to slow him down. But the problem is any kind of receiver could go off on any given night. So I think it makes it a little tougher to do that. But I feel like, he was catching the occasional touchdown in the prior games. This one, he was like the featured guy. 7 catches, 133 yards, 2 touchdowns. Caleb Williams seemed to be looking for him a little bit. Now, this is his old team. Another homecoming, so he's kind of going to be my X factor on offense, I think. But Lloyd, I think, is going to have a huge game.
One other guy too, Zachariah Branch took some major hits against Arizona State. If he is 100% healthy and ready to go against Colorado, I think he's the kind of player that absolutely kills the Buffaloes. We saw Oregon and Bo Nix. Bo Nix was like 20 of 20 on passes that were either 5 or 10 yards or less. And USC's bread and butter is getting the ball on those short passes to those slot receivers. Of course, Caleb Williams can throw the ball down the field too, but USC, what do they do such a good job of? It's those short passes, getting guys into space. This game for me screams Zachariah Branch having a big game too. On defense,
oh yeah,
I feel like if it's an MVP performance on defense, unless a secondary member gets a couple of picks or something, it's really tough for someone in the secondary to win that MVP overall. So I guess I'll just keep rocking with Solomon Byrd, who's looked great to begin the year. It's tough to slow him down right now.
I like Solomon Byrd, but I'm going to go Jameel Muhammad. I think he's leading the nation in like tackles for loss or something. Is that?
I think Byrd has more tackles for loss.
Or does Byrd have it? Oh, maybe Bird's got it. Okay, but they're both like they're disruptive. I think there's going to be sacks to be had in this one. Arizona State turned the ball over 8 times when they had all those different quarterbacks playing and all the guys injured. And USC didn't, you thought there'd be some turnovers to be had, but they got after the quarterback. I feel like that's something that's more consistent you can do, and I think USC is going to get after Shedeur. who's been sacked a lot. There's, I think, 22 or 23 times this year. So he's been sacked a lot, and I think USC is going to get some sacks. So I would look at one of those rush end players to get the MVP. Oscar is up next. We got a couple more, and we'll let you guys go. Shouldn't we establish the run before we start throwing the ball in the beginning of the game? Make them prove to us they can stop the run.
I think establishing the run is a little bit overrated. USC, they're so good.
Old school.
They can do both. I don't know. Like, I think just by kicking off in that game, they've established the run in the past. That's how good the offense is. I don't think they need to go out of their way to establish anything.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you're like, well, do you want the best player in the country to take care of distribute the ball a little bit before when you get things rolling? I mean, who's going to say no? I don't want Caleb Williams like throwing the ball around a little bit to start and get a feel. It seems like that's sort of him getting a feel for the game. It might be a little like dump off to like he started with like Zachariah Branch, a little dump off and let him take off and run. It seems like Lincoln Riley, Caleb Williams, they like him making a decision or two just right away. Some quarterbacks talk about like the game doesn't really start till I get hit. I'm not a big soccer guy, but I saw on Twitter like someone retweeted Maradona that was like when he was doing this warm up, like the stuff he was doing is just this crazy nonchalant stuff with the ball and his feet and his head and everything. I mean, it's sort of like how he got into these games, and it seems like for USC and Caleb Williams and Lincoln Riley, you just let Caleb make a few choices to start, and boom, and you get things going. So I know the old school way is like hand it off, establish the run. It seems like for USC, it's more like let Caleb like do a couple things, and then he's like into the game.
Colorado also does not get pressure at the rate needed to upset a Caleb Williams. Like against Arizona State, he was under pressure a little bit more than usual. On Colorado, there's only one player that has 2 or more sacks, and he has 2, Jordan Dominic. Everyone else is under 2. The next is 1.5, and then a bunch of guys have 1. They do not generate the pressure needed to really bother Caleb Williams. So while everyone, including us, are talking about how, well, USC is going to run the ball, Caleb Williams is going to have time, and when he has time, bad things happen, as we all know. For the defense.
Yeah. We got one last one from Eric. Let me pull this up. Question. What's the deal about Lincoln commenting on Dennis Lynch's speech following his announcement of being put on scholarship? Was there some people that were like
David
Woods
Woods was making a joke. Maybe did people take that wrong?
It was that was literally a joke. He loves trolling. No, it was hilarious, and like
I think he just called him quirky and said this. He doesn't really remember the speech because it didn't really make sense, and that's like who Dennis is.
He's quirky. He's a quirky guy.
Yeah, I don't think he's taking a shot. Lincoln Riley would never take a shot at one of his players. I don't even think it made Dennis Lynch look that bad. He's just kind of a different type of cat, and Lincoln Riley said that.
Yeah, it wasn't to look bad at all. It was funny because sometimes you ask a question and he's like, I'm not going to answer that, or he's not going to say I'm not going to answer, but he said something to like I'm not to the effect of I won't be answering that. Or if it was a private conversation, they might say that was between us. We're not going to do it. He literally like the funny part was he's looking around and literally like. Don't take this the wrong way. Like I couldn't describe it. Like if you're asking me this question, I couldn't describe what his speech was because it was sort of all over the place. And then it ended with, thank you, whatever. And I think he was just being genuine. That it was just this funny. Dennis was just being Dennis, and that's just the way he is. So yeah, I wouldn't. That's just. you probably saw David Woods' tweet, just like talking a little mess. So.
Yeah, or if you watched it and have a problem with it. Lincoln Riley's not the problem. You're the problem. You have a problem with what he said. Out of everything he's ever said, and we're getting upset about him describing the kicker speech after he gets put on scholarship. That's so low down on the list.
It was funny. I haven't seen. Did they put a video out of that or anything? Or
no? Maybe not. That was kind of like usually you do. I was surprised. Or even forget the speech. Just like. Yeah, like celebration. Dennis is on scholarship. I haven't seen anything like that. I was very surprised by that.
Yeah, he nailed that 53-yarder. It's like, yeah, that's pretty good. We had one little comment I just want to address. Mark, it looks like, or love you all, but why this awful time to go live? LOL. Whole West Coast is at work. Well, one, you're here, so thank you. Do you not work? We're working too. So for the podcast, we do our tunnel vision shows in the evening when we're trying to. That's really what we're focusing on, a live audience. The podcasts are like we have to do them when we can do them, and like practice is coming up a little bit, so we try to get it. We'll do it before practice goes. The reason, it's just the live aspect is just if you're around, and we also record it so you can watch it later on YouTube. So the goal of this is a podcast that we just do live also. But our live video shows that we put live on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, like the point is trying to get live people on. We do put that on as a podcast, but that's more of a secondary thing. So sorry about the timing and everything, but that's sort of like just how we do these and how we can fit stuff in. But Thursday night, we do a live show, 7 p.m. Sunday night, live show, 7 p.m. on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, or X, or whatever you want to call it now. So,
Yeah, and this podcast, too, like, it's great that everyone can join us live, but it's nice that it goes up right on Spotify, and then it's there, like, Wednesday in the afternoon, and then you got Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and whenever the game is Saturday, because we kind of, it's right in the middle, so we look back and we also look ahead. It's good to get as many days of this show, a shelf life for it as possible, so
Yeah.
I like doing it Wednesday.
get a few days soak, as they say in the Deadliest Catch when they're like putting the. Did you ever watch Deadliest Catch? Or
A little bit.
yeah, I used to love that show.
Well,
It's just-
that makes sense.
it kept going for a while.
Yeah.
I always wondered, like, could I do that? Like, I don't get seasick. Like, I'm in boats a lot, but man, it's like a lot of days at sea. Like, hitting ice with a sledgehammer and stuff sounds a little rough. But I'm a pretty tough dude. I think I could do that stuff. But man, that definitely looks tough.
I think you could do it.
Yeah, we'll see. Whatever. All right. Well, that's going to wrap things up. Thanks so much for everyone that joined us live, even if you're got to be at work or you're just watching on the sly instead of pulling up your solitaire game or whatever you do all day at work. We appreciate that. Chris always talks about, what are you guys doing? Yeah, we had like 250 people watching live. So enough people didn't work or took a break from work. So we appreciate you all doing that. If you're watching it on replay, that's amazing. If you're listening on any of the podcasting platforms, all of that's amazing. We appreciate it a lot. Real quick before we go, I had a funny, this is going to be my 30th reunion from graduating my undergrad at USC, 1993. I got my bachelor's in electrical engineering. Then 95, I did my master's. And I'm on the committee, and they had a meeting last night in Heritage Hall. So I'm like in Heritage Hall. They give like a tour of like the McKay Center and stuff. And one of the tour guide had to like go somewhere else. So I was like kind of continuing the tour myself a little bit, but it was funny. But I had people coming up to me and like, wait, are you Ryan Abraham? I'm like, yeah. They're like, and two of my classmates were there that I was with, and they were just like, what? Like, and like, oh yeah, like people know who I am. So it was just kind of funny that it was like,
I'm kind of a big deal.
People were like taking pictures with me and stuff on the tour or whatever. It was pretty funny. I was just like, yeah, if it's a reunion weekend for you, come on out. It's the Washington game, so that should be a lot of fun. There's a lot of events and stuff going on there. So you can hit me up, podcast@uscfootball.com if you want more information about that. Yeah, they had the half-century Trojans, so the guys from 1973. So 50 years, those guys. So it was pretty cool. They had a decent little group that was there last night. So yeah, a lot of people. It was cool to see some faces out there yesterday, but. All right. Anyway, that's going to wrap things up for Triple Double Connor Morrissette. I am Ryan Abraham. Hope you guys enjoyed the show, and we will talk to you next time.